Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Tuesday, the 4th of July. Indian Prime Minister embarks on a 3-day historic visit to Israel. "29 Taliban insurgents join peace process in Afghanistan." And film festival in India's Kashmir engages cine lovers. And now for all the details. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday arrived at Tel Aviv on his historic visit to Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed the Prime Minister personally. This is the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Israel. The two sides are expected to sign a number of agreements in the field of innovation, development, science and technology and space.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday began his historic visit to Israel, becoming the first Indian Prime Minister to visit the state. Prime Minister Modi during his stay in the country will hold talks with his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu in all the matters of mutual interest, particularly terrorism. He will also call on President Reuven Rivlin and address the Indian community in an event in Tel Aviv. The Indian Prime Minister will also attend a CEO forum in which CEOs of companies from both the nations will participate to discuss their shared priority of expanding bilateral trade and investment. India and Israel are expected to sign an agreement to create a $40 million research and development fund for joint innovation in areas of agriculture, water, energy and technology. It was in 1992 when India finally established full diplomatic relations with Israel, and this year both the countries are commemorating 25 years of diplomatic relations. In the second and the final leg of his tour, Prime Minister Modi will visit Hamburg in Germany to attend the 12th G20 summit.
Meanwhile, security forces finally gunned down the third militant on Tuesday in an encounter which began on Monday morning in Pulwama district of Indian Kashmir. Meanwhile, a search operation was launched in Bandipora district of the province after a tip-off about the presence of militants in a village.
An encounter in Pulwama district of Indian Kashmir ended on its second day on Tuesday, with security forces finally killing the third militant. The gun battle began after a search operation was launched on Monday morning by a joint team of Jammu and Kashmir Police and paramilitary Central Reserve Police Force, following specific inputs that militants were hiding in Bamnu area of Pulwama. 2 militants were killed on Monday, while the third was gunned down and his body recovered on Tuesday. Combing operations are currently underway. Meanwhile, a cordon was laid in a village in Bandipora district of the province after security forces got a tip-off about the presence of militants in the area. Kashmir has seen a spurt in militant activities with repeated attacks on security forces and police convoys. Indian security forces have gunned down several militants, including top commanders of militant groups like Hizbul Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Taiba over the last 2 months.
Staying on news from India, Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj on Tuesday invited companies from ASEAN countries to invest in numerous sectors in India. The Delhi Dialogue 9, being held in capital New Delhi, is celebrating 25 years of ASEAN-Indian partnership.
The Delhi Dialogue 9, commemorating 25 years of India and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN partnership, began in capital New Delhi on Tuesday. It is a premier annual Track 1.5 event being held annually since 2009 to discuss politico-security, economic and socio-cultural engagement between ASEAN and India. Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, addressing the ministerial session, said the GST rollout on July 1 has opened new opportunities for trade and investment in India.
I invite companies from ASEAN countries to take advantage of these opportunities for investments in India in numerous sectors such as smart cities, roads, highways, ports, railways, power and urban infrastructure.
India and ASEAN uphold each other's prominence in shaping the current regional structure as similar threats and concerns call for greater collaboration.
Moving on to news from Afghanistan, at least 29 Taliban insurgents laid down arms and joined the peace process in western Afghanistan this week, the Ministry of Interior said in a statement on Tuesday. 18 Taliban fighters in Uruzgan joined the peace process along with an additional 11 in Farah provinces and handed over weapons and ammunition to the security. Meanwhile, a Taliban commander, Abdul Rahim, has been arrested in Kabul city. The National Directorate of Security, or NDS, said in a statement on Tuesday. According to the statement, Rahim was the commander at least 20 insurgents. However, it did not provide more details, nor did it stipulate when he was arrested. The NDS said the Taliban commander had been acting on the orders of the Taliban's Quetta Council in Pakistan and had planned to carry out attacks in Kabul during Eid. More news from Afghanistan. Members of civilian group the Uprising for Change movement formed after the May 31st truck bombings in Kabul demonstrated through the streets of the city on Monday. The protesters called for the dismissal of the senior security officials, including the National Security Advisor.
Members of the Uprising for Change movement in Afghan capital Kabul on Monday took to the streets calling for the dismissal of the National Security Advisor, the Interior Minister and the National Directorate of Security, or NDS chief. Following the May 31 truck bombing in Kabul that killed over 150 people, the locals formed the movement and demonstrated questioning the authority about the security situation in the region. However, during the demonstration, security forces opened fire on them, killing at least 5 protesters. The protesters warned that they would continue to protest until those who ordered the shooting of protesters last month were prosecuted.
ما خواستار برکناری مدیران و بازیگران سیاسی با نهادهای امنیتی کشور محمد حنیف اکبر مشاور شورای امنیت ملی، معصوم استانکزی رئیس امنیت ملی و تاج محمد جاهد وزیر داخله کشور هستیم.
ما می‌خواهیم که یک تغییر بسیار جدی در ادمنستریشن دولت بیاید.
Meanwhile, General John Nicholson, the commander of NATO's Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan, along with other diplomats, paid tribute to security officials who defied the May 31st suicide bomber and sacrificed their lives to stop the truck from entering the green zone.
In news from Nepal, Nepal's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Krishna Bahadur Maharao, on Monday met Indian counterpart Sushma Swaraj in New Delhi. Both the leaders held a meeting which dealt with ways to step up cooperation in the areas of security, energy, water resources and trade, among others, between the two nations. Maharao, who is also the Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal, is said to have raised the issue of exchange of Indian currency notes that were demonetized last year by India that the Nepali citizens are holding. Maharao's visit to New Delhi comes a little less than a month after government change in Kathmandu, and it is also aimed at laying the ground for Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba's future visit to India. Devotees gathered at India's eastern Odisha province for the return cart journey, marking the conclusion of the famed Chariot festival. The chariot was pulled amid heavy drum beats and chanting.
Millions of devout Hindus converged in India's eastern Odisha province on Monday for the return of Hindu Lord Jagannath to Puri city, marking the conclusion of the annual Chariot festival. As per the Hindu mythology, Lord Jagannath, his brother and sister returned from Gundicha temple, 1.2 miles away from the Jagannath temple in Puri. The chariot return is held 8 days after the chariot marks the journey of Lord Jagannath and other deities to another temple from the main temple. The return of the chariot festival goes on for 2 days.
जगन्नाथ ऐसा करुणामय ठाकुर है। जगन्नाथ 9 दिन के लिए मौसी घर गए थे, अपने मौसी का दर्शन किए, अभी निकल रहे हैं अपने नीलकंदर को। श्री जगन्नाथ के करुणा ऐसा है।
A glimpse of Lord Jagannath on the chariot is considered to be very auspicious, and saints, poets and scriptures have repeatedly glorified the sanctity of the festival. Devotees consider the pulling of the chariots with ropes a pious deed and risk their lives in the huge crowd. The Chariot festival has been in existence for the past 1,000 years.
Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. Indian Prime Minister embarks on a 3-day historic visit to Israel. Taliban insurgents join peace process in Afghanistan. And film festival in India's Kashmir engages cine lovers. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/ASEAN-Newsline and follow us on Twitter @ASEAN-Newsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.